Cloud. So this from Robert Morris. You probably don't know Robert Morris. Anyone know Robert Morris? Kind of what's his significance in American history? If you're a descendant, you might know. He's one of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence. Actually, he was the also kind of known as the financier of the revolution. He was on the finance committee to try to raise money to fight a war because, of course, Congress doesn't have any ability to tax. And Morris is a very successful businessman. And he's going to, folks he knows, hey, we want you to loan money to the Continental Congress. We'll pay you back, we promise. And of course, it's a pretty risky investment, don't you think? Continental Congress is going to be fighting a war against the strongest, most powerful nation in the world. If they lose, what's going to happen to your investment? Poof. So time after time, people say, well, Robert, we know you. I'll loan money to you. I'm not loaning money to the Continental Congress. And so he would borrow on his own credit and then send that money to Congress. So sometimes hear about this. He's an amazing fellow. And then we'll kind of fast forward and we'll say he dies penniless. He really does. But he does recover the money that he borrowed. He gets through the revolution okay. He does die penniless, but it's because he speculated in real estate and lost his money in real estate. Okay, but nonetheless, another quote in the space of private virtue. Religion is the solid basis for good morals. Therefore, education should teach the precepts of religion and the duties of man towards God. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into Excel. Want to save? Sure, let's save. Okay, so we have a file to download today. So go ahead and go to September 27th over on the blog and download census.xlsm. And then let's go ahead and open that up and just take a look at what we have here, whether you're looking on your computer or my computer. What is this data? Someone look at this data and tell me something interesting about the data. I don't know, maybe interesting is too high of a bar to ask for. Tell me something about this data. Not just it's a bunch of numbers. It needs to be high. You got to kind of cross that threshold. Above that, go ahead.
I think what we did a couple weeks ago, it's the same sorted by county. So that first one.
Yeah. So you might remember we've looked at county data before, and so that's a pretty big jump because there's nothing on this page that says anything about county. So how did you get there? You're right, but how did you get there?
Because you said like 0 was the United States, now Alabama 2000.
Oh, you remembered that stuff. Unbelievable. I didn't even remember that stuff. That's pretty good. Right. Yeah. So 0 is the whole United States. 1,000 is the whole state of Alabama. And then this is one county in Alabama. But let's suppose you weren't, fortunate enough to have that primer on this data. So tell me, so you're right on, but tell me, what else can you figure out about this data? Feel free to look around the workbook. Tell me something else. Suppose you're on an internship, and your boss says, "Hey, Smithers, make some sense of this numbers for the annual report." Oh, okay. What is it? Okay, I thought. Go ahead.
It looks like they have the ages broken up. It's like the number and then also the percentage next to it.
Okay, so point me at something. If I'm like column H or G or something. Oh, okay. So just you're looking at this data and you think, so we've got something here, age 130208 and age 135208. Those sound pretty similar. And so you're inferring from that this looks like this is some category of age and this is the total number of those folks. And then presumably in the summarization unit that we've already identified, this in column A. So this is for the whole United States, and then that's the percentage of that category in the United States. Well, what is that category? So we got 6.9% of the population in the whole United States is what? Any idea? Yeah, go ahead.
Under 5 years.
Under 5 years of age. How did you get? I think you're probably right. How'd you get there?
I went to the next tab over.
So we have this thing called a data dictionary. Okay, so we're looking at age 135208. We come to data dictionary, and sure enough, we can look right down here and we can find age 135208, resident population under 5 years, estimate from 2008. This data is pretty old. The truth is, I probably should at least update this to the 2010 census. But since we just had the 2020 census and they're still working on it, I think I'm going to wait until those numbers come out. I don't know. Maybe by that time I'll be retired. So, right. Okay. So that's really what this is. So if we look then at each column, then this is, it's like the answer to a question for every different county or state or the whole nation, whichever row that we happen to be on. And so every number in H is the percentage of the population under 5 years of age. Is it under 5 or 5 and under? Under 5 years. So, like 0 to 4, that's the percentage of the United States. Let's see, I guess if we went down and found Utah, Utah is like 49. Utah is, I forget, was it 40? Oh, I don't remember. Well, how can we find out which one's Utah? We find out which one was. Let's go look at Utah County. How are we going to do it? Let's go to county names. And then, oh, look, we're on Gov County. We're on my county by default. Have fun. So we can search for Utah. And there's the state of Utah. And I'm looking for actually Utah County. Oh, 49049. Oh, I just didn't get down far enough. Yeah, alphabetical and all. There we go, 49049. So I'll come back over here to my data set. I'll go on column A. I'll search for 49049. Okay, so that's my data set. And then which one was I guess I could do is freeze column or freeze rows to be able to get that one, but I forget which column it was now. It's probably H. Yeah, it's H. So yeah, as I expected, population under 5 years of age is going to be relatively high in Utah County compared to other places. We have a lot of kids. Wow, I'm just kind of scanning. I'm not seeing anyone else. There's another 11.5. That's pretty good. Okay. This is the data exactly the way that I downloaded it from the United States Census Bureau, except for one thing. Over here on county names, I made column D that shows the state and the county together. Other than that, this is the way you get the data from the federal government. What do you think? Is this data easy to work with or difficult to work with? Yeah, it's difficult to work with, and it probably isn't meant that you just come in and start snooping around. But let's suppose that's what we want to do. We want to be able to kind of say, I'm interested in looking at a particular county, and I want to see, what are all the different values for a particular county. And maybe I'd like to compare 2, 3, or 4 counties side by side and be able to see that. So that's going to be our goal today. So as it turns out, sometimes, when we're trying to cover the material that we're after for a given day in class, I'm just going to kind of go over like the different parts of what I want you to learn, but they'll be disconnected from each other. We've done that a couple of times. The nice thing about doing it that way is I can cover more ground, but it just feels really disconnected. So today we're taking a different approach. Today's approach is we're going to solve a real problem. I think hopefully by the end of the class, we'll have a kind of a sense of accomplishment, a sense that we've done we've created something valuable, kind of an example start to finish. And along the way, I'll try to bring in as much as I can about working with ranges, so we can see some of the different ways that we work with ranges. So let's go ahead and start off by making a new sheet. What I'd like to do is, in fact, I'm just going to copy the data dictionary sheet. It looks like a pretty good one to start with. So let me just kind of do a control drag. And I will change the name of that to, I'll call it compare. And I don't want anything else to the right. So I just want the names of these variables. Just did a control drag, or of course you can right click and you could choose move or copy, and then you could say create a copy and then okay. Or just control, click and drag will do the trick as well. Actually, I don't think I want column A either. Whew. And I don't really want what's in A1. I'm going to leave everything else right where it is. So this is just, so what I have now here is just the labels of those different columns. So when I'm looking at a particular, column of row of data, looking across it, each of those values that go across that row are going to correspond to, one of the labels that we have listed here. So the goal here is to have some way for the user to pick a county to look at and then automatically bring the data for that county in right here. And then, if they're going to say, no, you know what, I'd like to look at another county, then boom, let's give us 2 counties side by side. I want to look at another county. Well, let's give us 1, 2, 3 counties here to be able to look at. We ready to do it? Okay, so how might we make some kind of a drop down? What do you know about Excel that could let us make some kind of a drop down to choose the county we're interested in? So data validation is one of the things that we could do. Where is data validation? Data validation, right. Data validation would do it. So we could say, you know what, over here in A1, I want to do data validation. We'd say, we configure it to say pick from a list, show what the list is, and then it would just give us those options. That wouldn't be a bad way to do it. I've never done it that way. We could do it that way. We'll let you guys decide how you want to do it. That's one way. How many of you are already familiar with data validation at some level? How many of you are going, data validation, never used it before? Okay, so kind of a split there. The other way that we can do it is on the developer tab, we've got some tools that we can bring in. And over here under insert, we can insert a combo box, which is this one. And that will just let us actually make a box that kind of sits on top of the worksheet that we could then fill with values. And this is the way I normally have done it. But why don't we go ahead and do data validation? Data validation is kind of a slick way to do it as well. It'll require a little more code for us to make it work, but I think that's all right. It's not a bad thing for today. Okay, so what I'm after here now, let's come to data. I'll come to data validation. All right, now what we're saying here is what data is allowed to go into A1? That's what this question is asking. So on the data tab, I chose data validation, this guy right here. Now, right now, the default is any value, put whatever you want. No. I want to restrict that to a list. And then it's asking me for a source. Where is the list of valid values? So I'll just click on that, and then I'll go over here to my county names, and I will choose, I wonder if I can just choose all of column D. I'm not sure that's wise or not. Do we have, yeah, column D. There's no headers on here, so I'll choose column D. Ignore blanks, in cell dropdown. That all looks fine. So now we'll say OK. So now when I select this, I get a drop-down list. And then, here's how I could choose then a particular county. So that's good. Because I definitely don't want the user trying to type in a county because they're going to type it wrong. And as soon as they type it wrong, it's going to be something for me to try to figure out, well, what are they talking about? So any question on getting this data validation set up? I don't remember. Let's take a look at it. Come to data validation. And there, that is how I configured it. Does that answer the question? Yes. Excellent. Allow list, yes. So we're telling it, we're going to give it a valid list, and whatever they put in there has to be one of the values on that list. And then we're telling it where to get the list from. I just said column D of county names. And this is the reason that I joined those values together, is so you could kind of see them just in one cell. Ready to move on? I should say it this way. Anyone saying, hey, I'm almost caught up? Hold on just a second. Okay. I don't know. We'll see how we have on time today. I may show you the other way using the form element that sits on the page as well. Windows minus. Okay, so now the user has selected that. We're going to need some way to trigger some code when the user makes that selection. So a couple of ways that we could do it. We could put a button right here onto this form, or we could do something a little more advanced. Let's put a button for now. And we may come back and actually make it happen automatically when the user makes the change. But for right now, let's put a button on. And so I'm going to come back to my developer tab, and I'm going to come to insert. And that very first one is the button control. Now there's actually two buttons here. There's ActiveX controls down here. There's a button, and there's form controls. Generally speaking, the form controls look nicer, and they're a little bit easier to work with than the ActiveX controls. The ActiveX controls are a little more powerful, but the form control is going to give us everything we want to for today. And so we're going to choose this form control button right here. And then I'm just going to draw that. I'm just going to draw the picture, like maybe right in here in cell A2. It says button 3 click. I'll say OK. We'll probably reassign that here in just a minute. Oops. I'm going to right click that and change the text. So right click and then escape. And I should be able to click on that and change the text instead of button 3. What shall we put? We'll put get county data. Yeah, and by holding the control key down, you can select that. So you can change the position, change the size, change the text, click off of it again, and then it's going to try to execute. And try to execute whatever code we have behind it. Right now, there's no code behind it. So we're going to go make our procedure. So now that the user has given us a choice for they've given us the county or the value that they're looking for, now we need to go ahead and figure out how we're going to pull the data in. We ready to do it? Let's go ahead and do it. So well, we could do it this way. I'm going to choose, actually, I'm not quite sure. Assign macro. Yeah. Census, button 3 click. I'm not really thrilled with that name, so let's do this way. Let's go ahead and just come into our Visual Basic editor, Alt F11. Let's insert a module. I'll split my screen so we can kind of see both things going on here. And we'll make a sub procedure called get one county. And just so we can kind of see this working, I'll do debug.print, and then I'll just say now. If I run this, that will just print the current time from the system clock. But now if I right click my button and choose assign macro, I can choose that get one county, and that will connect up that button to this macro. So now if I click off of it and click it again, we can see that it runs that procedure. Okay. So now we got to figure out how are we going to find the right row that has the data with the county name. So given the county name, we have to find the row that we're talking about. So instead of printing now, let's just show that it works. You go ahead and get a variable, dim the row, as a long integer. Now again, there's 3,000 some odd counties. I could get by with integer, but personally, if I'm referring to a row, I want to use long integer so I don't end up adding data to the end and going out of range. Now, how are we going to talk to me? How are we going to figure out which row? Because looking over here at my data set, I've got to get to the right row. How am I going to figure out which row number has the data? Because kind of what I'm trying to do is take all of these numbers for the selected county, and I want to put them on my compare sheet just in the next column over. So I want those numbers I want those numbers to line up right here so that I can see the label and see the number. So thoughts, how am I going to find the right row? Give me an algorithm, give me a set of steps that I can follow that I can then tell VBA, just do this and you'll get the right data. Go ahead. Ah, okay. So what you're saying is just look back here in column D, find out which row actually has the data that's in the data validation. We know it has to be one of the values here because that's what it's allowed to go into that cell. And then you're saying, come over here, look to this number, and then look up that number over on the Excel workbook. Yeah, I like it. In fact, maybe even a little bit simpler, we might notice here that these are in numeric order. So 0, 1000, 101, 103, 105. And if we wanted to actually check, we could see they really are sorted. There's not a 102 somewhere else. There just is no 102 here. And if we come back and look at our data set, those are the same numbers in that sequence. So the problem is they're offset by 1, right? So here is 0 starts on 2, whereas over on counting names, 0 starts on row 1. Other than that, they go. So once I find the right row here, I can just adjust that by 1 and get to the right data. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a find. You've recorded yourself doing a find, haven't you? You've already done this part, so this is pretty good. But let's go ahead and extend the find just a little bit to make it a little bit more sophisticated. So now that we know about object variables, let me dim found cell as a range. I'm going to show you kind of a general approach for how do you handle, trying to find something. How many of you experienced on the project where your code says, hey, go find something that's on the sheet that got imported from the data query, from the web query, and your code would break if it couldn't find what it was looking for? You get an error. Yeah, trying to find that, couldn't find it. Your code assumes that it finds it. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and put code in here to handle when it can't be found. Now, hopefully, we'll never have to deal with the little error handling here because the only thing that's allowed to go here is valid values. We should be able to find them. But let's suppose the user comes in and takes off the data validation, and we want our code still to be able to exit gracefully from that. Okay, so I've declared a couple of variables up here. Let's just go ahead and find what we're looking for. So let's go ahead and make another variable just called the county. And we're going to read that variable in. So county equals. So I want to look right here in A1 of the sheet called compare. So maybe before we do that, let's go ahead and get a reference to that sheet because it's going to be kind of a little bit longer to refer to that sheet. So let me dim S as a worksheet. And then let's bind S, that variable S, onto the worksheet that we want. So I'm going to look at a particular workbook, this workbook. What does this workbook mean? This workbook is like a shortcut to refer to a particular object. Which object does this find? It's a particular workbook. Which workbook is it? It's not the active workbook. There's a similar shortcut called active workbook. That gets whichever workbook is active. It's different than this workbook. What's this workbook? Yeah, this workbook is the workbook that contains the code that's executed. This line of code right here, the one that's currently being executed, is in some workbook. It doesn't matter if it's active, if it's visible or whatever, that's referring to the workbook that contains the code. And we're building this code into census.xlsm, so that's the one we're after. Now there's a set of worksheets on this one, and there's a worksheet that I named compare. And so now, that kind of long expression is now just, it takes this long expression here to find exactly the worksheet I'm talking about. Well, to get to the memory address in memory where that worksheet is. And now S is just going to be a kind of a shorter way to get to that same memory address. So now I can say S dot. And there's several ways I can go after this particular worksheet or that particular cell, right? And we've seen some of them. I'm going to introduce you a new one right here, right? So one would be to say range A1 dot value. I'll go ahead and put a breakpoint in there, and I will run this code. And let's take a look at what my county is. So yeah, it's read the value in from there. There's another method. This is the range method that allows us to figure out which range we're talking about. What's another way that we've used that would let me get to that particular cell? So instead of range, I could use, yeah, cells. And with cells, then I can actually say, I do the row first and then the column. So if I go back and run that line, it's still going to give me the same, oh, it should be cells, plural. It should give me the same value. So I executed that line. Yep, it's still pointing at Ward, North Dakota. I can come over here and change it. And of course, instead of using A for that, I can put the column number. So row and column. In fact, anytime I've got an ordered pair of integers that takes me to a particular cell in Excel, in VBA, it's always going to be row first and then column. I mean, normally when you look at a range, it's column first, A1, column first, and then row. When you give just a pair, an ordered pair, it's the opposite. Here's the new way that I'm going to introduce to you. And it's, when I first saw this, I was absolutely boggled by the notation. But that works as well to identify the value. The strange thing here is that this is the only place I've ever seen square brackets used in VBA. And the thing that's so boggling to me, is that that is not a string, right? String would be in quotes. It's not a string literal. It's just say, listen, this is a way that we can refer to a particular cell by its address just by putting it in square brackets and then putting the address of the cell in square brackets. If I'm using one of the approaches that allows me to use an index, just a variable, just a number like cells, 1, 1, I can put some variable in there that I could then have someone else change the value of the variable and then refer to it, such as I could say, I'll just put this as a comment, cells R, C dot value. So if I say, R equals 1 and C equals 1, then this is going to refer to row 1, column 1. But if it's just going to be fixed, and I'm not going to want to do any trick like this where I let some other process determine what's going to be the value in that variable, I just want to have a reference to a literal range, I can do it just that way. Questions? Go ahead.
You can reference multiple cells that way.
Oh.
Say A1 to B2.
Sure, yeah. If we're dealing with a range, we'll just do it up here. The question is, could I say, find the right brackets, A1 to B16 dot address, then that's a reference to a multi-cell range. Yeah, and I think I'd be really surprised if I can't even do discontiguous cells as well. So comma and all of column C, then yeah, it lets me go there. Questions? Other questions? Because I had literally programmed in VBA for decades before I ever came across this syntax, it's never top of my mind when it comes to writing a cell. I'll probably never ever use it again in class. It's not because I dislike it, it's because I just don't think of it. I mean, there are way other ways that I think of referring to a cell before this one ever kind of comes up to my consciousness. Okay, so now I've got the county that I'm looking for. So let's go ahead and look at that. Let's go ahead and look for that on my county names sheet. Now, I'm not going to be doing very much with the county names. I'm just trying to figure out which row number we're on. So I may not map a whole variable just to be this sheet. But let's go ahead and see if we can find the county name that we're after. So remember, when we're going to bind an object variable, like my found cell, which is a range, it's an object. But what kind of object am I allowed to bind this variable onto? Only range objects. So I'll use the keyword set found cell equal to, refer to a particular sheet in this workbook. Not worksheets. The sheet I'm looking for is called county names. I'm now looking in column number 4. See where I can show the whole thing up here. Okay, so this whole expression here is a reference to column number 4 on that worksheet in this workbook. We're okay here? Now, of that, I want to call the find method. Now, unfortunately, my editor is not capable enough to look at this whole expression here and realize we are talking about a column on a worksheet. So I'm not getting any IntelliSense help here. That's okay. I know the order that these arguments go. But how could we get the IntelliSense help? Realize that find is a method of what kind of object? It's not looking at a string. There are ways to kind of look into a string to find something in it, but find is working on, I heard it, say it again. It's a range. Yeah, it's working on a range. So the problem here is not that I don't have a valid reference to a range, is why I'm not getting any help when I hit this open parenthesis. It's because this is so complex that the Visual Basic editor is going, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about there. But if there was some simpler reference to a range, I'd be able to do this. So I'm just going to cheat a little bit here. And I'm going to come down here, and I know that it knows that found cell is a range. So I'm just going to say found cell dot find. And now it's giving me the IntelliSense help, because the editor can look at that and go, oh, that's a range. Oh, this is the find method of the range class. Great, here's what you're going to use. I'm not really going to be looking at found cell. I'm going to bind found cell onto the results of it, looking in column 4 of this particular sheet. But at least here I can say what I'm looking for. What am I looking for? County. Right? I read the value off of A1, put it into the variable called county. I'm not going to put in an argument for after. I'm not going to put in for look in. For look at, I'm going to say look at the whole cell's value. So XL whole. We could, I don't think the order is not going to matter. Match case. Yeah, let's go ahead and match case. And that's probably all we need. So that should give me just the arguments that I'm after. And now I'll put that in up here. So that was just a little trick to kind of get the help to be able to figure out what the help should be here. Another way that I could have done it, I could have Googled it and looked at the list. That would have worked. I could have recorded myself doing the find, and that would have given me the arguments that I was after as well. Questions here? Now, in the code that you recorded before for the project, you said we're going to find something. This will evaluate to an object. And then you came here and you said dot activate. And that's why it fails if it doesn't find it. Because if this doesn't evaluate to a cell, if this doesn't actually find the cell, and you try to dot activate it, it's going, there's no cell here. Activate what? There's nothing to activate. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop here. We're just going to bind on our found cell onto, hopefully, that'll be a cell that it finds. So I'm going to go ahead and just run that line. Let's see. I think my county does have a value in it. Let me just check real quick. Yep. So I'm going to run that. And let me find what found cell is. Yeah, so it found it on the 2078th row of that data set. That's great. Well, it turns out I don't really want the address. What do I want? Yeah, I want to know what the row is. And actually, I really want row +1. Wait, is it +1 or is it -1? Yeah, it's +1 because the table with the data has headers. This table does not have headers. So this is going to be found the cell. Now, here's the thing. I want to say, listen, if I was successful in finding the cell, then I want to move forward. If not, that's some kind of problem. Probably should let the user know and get out of here. So I'm going to do this. Question, yeah, go ahead.
What is the Excel hole telling it to do?
Oh, Excel hole is telling it to match the entire contents of the cell. So,
Just get like part of it.
right, yeah. And then the truth is, I think I would have been happy just looking for the value. All the rest of the default should be okay, because whether it's matching case or not doesn't matter, because I know I'm going to have the right case because I'm doing data validation. I do have, when I'm doing data validation, I do have to be careful with whether I'm searching for the whole cell or not if one of the cells is a subset of what one of the other cells is. I don't think we're going to have that here. Unless we had, like, it would be possible to have a county name that's like, you know, like if we had Clark County, Alabama, and North Clark County, Alabama, then it's possible it would find the North Clark County if it was looking for part, but yeah. So because, you know, that's something I'm not positive about, I do want to tell it here, yeah, make sure you're looking for the whole content of the cell, not finding it just in part of the cell. Okay. So there's a couple of ways that we can do this. I'm going to show you the way that will make sense to you, and then I'm going to show you the way that it's more commonly done. So it turns out found cell, there's a function built into VBA called type name. And that I can give any variable or any expression to that, and it'll tell me what is that. Is it an integer? Is it a string? Is it a range? Is it a worksheet? Is it a workbook? It'll just tell me what that is. Now, the good news here is that if this was successful, then found cell will be connected onto a range. So the type name of found cell will be range. So we could use that to determine was it successful to be found. By the way, what is it if it doesn't find it? Let's do this. Let's come down here. Instead of looking for county, let's look for county plus a capital X on the end. It's not going to find any county with that name. Does this make sense what I'm doing here? I'm just changing this code here to make the find fail so we can see what it behaves like. I'm going to drag this back up to there and run that. And now let's ask for the type name of found cell. It's nothing. So when the find fails, the type is nothing. When it succeeds, the type is range. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to put like a little error check right here, and I'm going to say if found cell, we'll do type name. The type name of found cell is equal to nothing. And that's my only two possibilities, nothing or range. Then here I'm going to put a message back to the user. Unable to find a county named, and then I'll concatenate on county here. Second argument for message box is an argument that can be kind of complex. I can specify the buttons that go here, as well as the like little icon, the sound it will make. I'm going to make this critical to let folks know it's an error. And then I'll put a message at the top. This next argument is the message that goes to the top of the dialog box that shows up. Data error. And then I'm going to say, now you remember that we could exit. We learned that we could exit early out of a do loop or a for loop by saying exit do or exit for. It turns out you can exit out of a sub procedure as well and just say exit sub. So now if I get to this point and I'm looking at this and I don't know what's happened, but I didn't find the value I was looking for. There's no county there for me to map onto, so I'm not going to have a number to go and pull the data. I'll put some message up to the user and I'll exit out of the sub procedure. That should be fine. Let's just go ahead and run that and see what it does. F5, data error, unable to find the county named Williams, North Dakota. Gave me a little error message here, X, and it kind of had that error sound. I'll say okay, and I'm not going to hit my stop because I got out of the sub procedure at this point. Questions? Okay. How comfortable are you with this? Asking for the type name of a variable and checking to see what string it is. Just show me on a scale of like 0 to 5. Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. You never see it this way in other people's code. The way that you'll see it is, it's a little simpler to write. If found cell is nothing. Nothing is a special object in VBA that it's the only object that has neither methods nor properties. It's just an object. And anytime I create an object variable, you remember how every variable has a default value? If you create a string variable, it's going to have a 0-length string as a default value. If you create a number variable, whether it's byte, int, long, single, double, currency, it's going to start with a value of 0. If you make a date variable, you don't tell it what date, it's going to start with December 30th, 1899 or something. It's some default value. Well, when you create an object variable, its default value is actually, it's just, remember, it's just object variables point to some other object. They point to the location in memory where the object is. So they are pointing to this object called nothing. And so is allows me to check for equality between objects. Are these two references pointing to the same object? Nothing is the name of that kind of placeholder object, and that is what found cell will be pointing to if the find method fails. And so this will behave the same way. We'll go ahead and run it. Unable to find it, and we're out. And of course, it's not finding it because I've tacked on in the find here, I've tacked on this X to make it fail. So I should be able to take that out, run this code again. And now it successfully finds it. And found cell is pointing at that particular location. Whew. This is the way that you search for something in a cell in Excel and be able to know, did I find it or not? I'm just going to check to see if found cell is nothing. And then of course, we'll get to kind of the more complexities of what else we can do with the if clause, it's an if statement later. There's lots of things we can do. This is a simple version of it. Questions? Is this the first time we've seen the if statement in class? Yeah, we got a whole day on the if statement and kind of similar statements. So for today, just kind of accept it and believe, and let's move on. Okay, so now if I made it here, let's put a little comment in. If we made it here, we know that we have found the county. Of course, I'm using county. Could be a state they're looking for, the whole United States, but we found what we're looking for. All right, so now I'm going to change the value of my variable, the row. I'm going to establish that. So the row is going to be equal to found cell dot row plus 1. So that then should have the row of the data that I'm actually after. All right. Any thoughts? I mean, how would you go about getting the data? I mean, now we know where the data are. Let me go ahead and find that line. It was 2000 something. So Williams, North Dakota, the row is 2079. So I should be able to come back to my data set, go to 2079. And this is the data that I want. I want to bring this row of data and I want to put it onto this column. Kind of starting right here, I think, going down. how would you do that if you're just doing it in Excel? Let me tell you how my mom would do it. She'd go and probably copy one cell at a time. She's learned how to copy and paste. She'd probably go get one cell at a time, copy this one, move it over, paste, copy this one, move it over and paste. How would you do it? Yeah, paste transpose. Do you think there's anything like paste transpose available to us in VBA? Yeah, I mean, you can always record yourself doing it and see the code. Or should we record it or shall I just show you what it's like? Okay, good. I don't remember, so let's record it. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. All right, so where I want to put it, I want to put it right here in B3. So, so first what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the data that I'm after. So we've got the row that we're after. And so let's refer to that whole set of data. Now we've got a couple of things we've got to think about. First question is, do we have to worry? So we want to get this whole row. The truth is, I think we could copy literally the whole row, all these extra cells over here, because a worksheet is a lot longer than it is wide. So we could just copy that whole row and then come over here to paste it in B3 and just do a paste transpose and drop it down. I think that would work. That might be our simplest way there. Then the nice thing about that approach is that we don't have to worry about, well, next year when we get the new census, what do you think? Do you think we'll have any new columns with the next census we get? Yeah, we're going to have new columns. And we'd kind of like the code to work even when we put in a different set of data in here. So it means a couple of approaches. One would be, let's just go ahead and take the whole column, do a paste transpose, or the whole row, do a paste transpose. Two, just figure out exactly where the data are, and then take that and do a paste transpose. I think taking the whole row will be the simpler way. And I'm pretty sure it'll work. So let's give it a shot. So now, let's see, let me look at view my project explorer. Now, my data set, my sheet called data set has a code name built into it. Right, so here, remember that we have two different names for worksheets. In parentheses is the name that shows on the tab. Not in parentheses is how I can refer to that through code. And so I can look at my sheet called data. And I can refer to that, let's see, Windows minus, I can refer to that through code. So now I'm just going to say data. That gets me to the right sheet. I'm looking at a particular row. Which row do I want? The row. Dot copy. Now I'm ready to paste that onto my compare sheet. Well, remember, I knew I was going to be working with that compare sheet, and so I bound the variable s onto the worksheet named compare. The truth is, folks, I could come here and rename it. Probably should rename it. So I could come here, select sheet 1, compare, and change the name of it right here. I have found out that if we try to do that in class today, for about 10% of you, that name won't be available until you close Excel and open Excel, close the workbook and open the workbook again. And I'm not sure why that is. So we're not going to do that. But the truth is, we probably should. I mean, that's probably where we should go. Because this now is sensitive to the user changing the name of the sheet from compare to something else, yeah? Because we're actually we're connecting onto this worksheet based on what shows on the tab. Okay. So, but we've bound the variable s onto the sheet that we're trying to push the data onto. So s dot, and let's just go ahead and use the range method to go to B3. And then there is a method of that called paste special. And then we should be able to tell it to transpose. One of these is going to be transpose. One of these is not going to be transpose. Oh, should have recorded it. Let's just Google it real quick. Transpose equals true. Oh, it's not the next argument. That's the problem. So copy, let's see. We're copying it. I thought I started writing the answer here. So I'm going to do, I think we'll do values here. We could skip this one, but I am just after the values. And special operation, see, transpose this one way out here. A couple ways I can get to it is I can say, I don't care about this argument, don't care about this argument. See how transpose is now the selected one? Now I'll say true there, and that will do a paste transposing the values. Or we can say, listen, the only argument I'm after, the only argument that I care to supply is the transpose argument. We'll use a colon equals sign. Either one of these will do, they'll do exactly the same thing. Well, this one forces it to be pasting values. But this one says we're going to supply a value for, or skip each one of the possible values we can supply. This one says skip them all except the named value transpose. And I think the transpose actually reads a little bit better. And so I'm going to leave that. We'll go ahead and leave them both in the code. But this one will be the one that does the paste for us. So I'll go ahead and run that code. Did I copy it already? And that should have put those values then right into the worksheet where I'm after. Questions? Yes.
Are we going to change the B3 stuff?
Oh, the question is right now, if I was to do another one, I'll just go and choose somebody else here. Let's go ahead and take Baldwin County. And if I run this, oh, I'm still in break mode. So let me go stop my code. Get rid of my stop in here and get that data. Yeah, it's writing right over the top of it. So yeah, we'll need to make some changes to this, but we're not quite ready to make that change yet because I do want to bring in here, because as soon as I say I've got two showing, I'm going to want to show probably the state and the county name here so that I have them to compare. Because right now I can see the one I most recently chose. Let's go ahead and put those in as well. So let's see. We should be able to do that just into range B1. And we're going to pull that off of, let's see, we have a named sheet for county names. It's called counties. It actually has a code name. So we can just use that. Counties dot cells. Which row do we want? We want the row +1. Maybe I should have kept the row as the actual one that I found it. But anyway, no, the row -1. Remember, we read the row where we found the data, and then we added one onto it to put into the row. So when we're referring to our data sheet, we want the row. If we're referring to our county name sheet, we'll subtract one off of it. That'll be the row that we're after. The column that we want to pull in is going to be we want to put state at the top and then the county underneath. Yeah, let's do that way. So then that will be column 3. And then B2, we'll read out of column 2. So now we should paste in the data, put in the name of the state, put in the name of the county. Let's give it a try. So we've got Baldwin. Let's take Barber. Oops. S.range B3 dot value. This is doesn't make any sense at all. Equals that. Okay, so that brings in our state and our county. Yeah, I just had that data, had the line written incorrectly. Questions on what we've done so far? Okay. So now the student suggests we're going to have to change this code somehow to make it so that we get the data not writing right over each other when we make a new copy, when we choose a new county, but to put it, somewhere else. So any thoughts on how we should go about doing that? Go ahead. So we could have something to say, let's check and see if there's any data there. And if there is, let's move over. That'd be, do something to do an offset there. Yeah, we might be able to kind of find out, exactly what's my first blank column, maybe a loop that looks until I find a blank column, and then kind of count how many cells it was, and then use that as an offset. So instead of just referring to that cell where we're putting it, we're going to use that as an offset as part of the offset method. That would work. It's more work that I want to do, and there's a much simpler way. Any other thoughts? So somehow we can keep track of it. Now, the problem with using a counter variable is that this program is going to run and then stop. And so that counter variable is going to be, we'll have to somehow keep track of it. We could put it into a cell, but then we've got to keep that cell synchronized with however many times the users run it. And if they delete a column off, it's going to change. So that would work, but again, more work than I want to do. Yep. So we could find the cell without having to do a loop. We could do find the cell to find out the column that we're going to try to write in. Yeah, again, more work. There is such a simple, it's like, there's a really, really easy way to do this. And right now, what you're doing is you're thinking, I want to put my newest data. Yeah, you're saying I want to put my newest data kind of out here as we go. I think that's wrong. I think the newest data, the one I've just selected, should be the one closest to the labels. That's the one I'm most interested in anyway. And so if part of my process just says, you know what, let's just insert a column right here, then it'll push the data over and we'll always be writing into the same place. So let's just do that first. Before we start putting any data in, let's just make room for the data. And so that is going to be data.columns to .insert. And again, we could record, if we didn't know that, we could record ourselves doing it, see what it was, and that would do the trick. And it seems like, oh, that's going to be perfect. The only problem is when you insert a column, let's go ahead and insert a column here. It picks up the width of the column to the left as the default width. That's terrible, because that's way wider than I need it to be. Good news. There's a function for that. So after I put the data in, I'm going to go ahead and refer to that same column. And I'm going to say Autofit. Yeah, I think that's a method. Will that do it for me? Go ahead and put that in, make my code a little wider, and let's give it a try. Wasn't quite sure what error I saw there. Can't paste here because the copy arm press aren't the same size. Well, yeah, but it worked before. So what do I got going on here? Ah, it's because I've already got something copied. So let's do that before we get to the copy. Yeah, the insert is thinking that I'm trying to do the paste here as well. So I'm gonna do that before I get to the copy. Yeah. So instead of Barbara, I'm gonna choose a different one. Data columns 2. All right, I'm gonna put a breakpoint and see what's going on here. Seems like I got the insert wrong. I thought the default was to shift it to the right. Oh, you see the problem? Where am I inserting the column? I'm inserting it over here on the wrong sheet. So the sheet I want to insert it on is S. Yeah, S is my compare sheet. Okay, so back to compare, and let's stop this and run it again. And this needs to auto fit on that column there. I'm not sure why I lost my data labels. Anyone else lose their data labels? Oh, thank you. So I'll just copy those data columns in again for my data dictionary. Okay, now we're auto fitting the right column. Column 2, we're looking at B. All right. Oh, I lost my data formatting too. So got to put that back in. Data validation. Choose from a list. Where is the list? County names, column D. Looks like, boy, when I delete that column, I got rid of everything. Bring the button back in. Get one county. Call it show county data. Whew. Well, I think we finally got there after a few missteps along the way. Not quite sure why there's a G right on the border there. Do you see that G?
What's your button?
Ah, thank you. So it didn't delete it, just moved it over. So we had 2 buttons that were pulling the data in. Got a bunch of counties the same. All right. Well, we had a few missteps on the way today. Usually like to do a little bit better than that, but got the code to where we were after it. Questions? Okay, let's do something else neat here, and that is let's get rid of this button. Let's make it so that when the user changes this cell, it just puts the data over. Yeah. If every time when you click the button, it's deleting column A, it's because you have an A2 here, which is actually what I typed in while I was trying to figure out why I wasn't inserting a column. So that needs to be B2. Question here?
It's the data.column to the Autofit that makes it stop really making it really big. The B column.
So yeah, again, I was referring to the wrong sheet.
Oh,
So S is the right one. Yep. Remember, data is the reference to the sheet that actually has all the numbers, and S is our compare. Probably should have given it a better name than S, but there we go. Okay. In the next 7 minutes, I'm going to introduce you to a brand new idea. It happens that we can make, so far, every time we've wanted to make code execute, we've done it from one of three ways. We've either had a button that you click on to say, go execute this code, or we just run the code directly from inside the Visual Basic Editor, hit the play button, or we set up a hotkey to run it. There is a much more sophisticated way to tell code to run. And that is we can make our code respond to an event. And there's lots, there are dozens upon dozens of different events that we can choose happening in Excel. We say, listen, when this happens, just, hey, Excel VBA interpreter, just keep an eye out for any time something happens. And when this happens, run the event. Or when this happens, run the code. When this event happens, run the code. And so what I want to do is I want to say, listen, anytime a cell changes on this worksheet, I lost my mouse. Anytime a cell changes on this worksheet, I want to run some code. Now, the only one I really want to run my code for is if cell A1 changes. But there's not an event just for A1 changing. There's an event for a cell changing. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we're going to do that. So for this, I have to have my Project Explorer open. And so far, the only module that we've written code into has been module 1. I mean, we've created a module. But if I look at all these other Excel objects up here, these also have, these are modules themselves. This is not a reference to that sheet. This is a reference to the module that's built into that sheet. So let's go ahead and look at our compare sheet. And I'm going to double click that module right here. It doesn't look like there's very much here, and there's not. But now I can look at these two drop-down boxes that I have right here. And I'm going to say, I want to kind of watch for events to happen on the worksheet. So I'll choose worksheet. And it's guessing that I want to execute code when a different range gets selected. It guessed at which event I wanted. So saying on the worksheet, we're going to listen to run code every time the selection changes. Whew. I'm just going to do a debug.print so you can see it. Now, every time I change which cell is selected, it's going to run that code. Right? So I can say, oh, another cell got selected, run the code. A cell got selected, run the code. Now, I don't want it when a cell gets selected, and that's what this dropdown is for. I want to do it when a cell changes. So now, if any cell changes, come over here and just change the cell, put a value in here. Clear off my immediate window so you can see it happen. Put a new value here. That's going to trigger, it says, hey, there was a change on this worksheet. Now, this procedure that gets run automatically by the event has something passed into it. So it gets a range passed into it, and that's the target. That's what just got changed. So let me go ahead and, that's a range. So let me print the target's address. So I'm on E2, I'm going to change the value in E2 by deleting it. And it's telling me that it changed A2, it changed E2. If I come over here now and choose my drop down, we should see that it's going to change A1. So I'll change that, and now it's fired that, and the address is A1. That's the only time I want this code to execute, is when a cell changed, and the cell that changed is A1. So I'm going to come here and say if target, and again, that target's a little bit strange, but it's what it's getting passed in. That's what's passed into this. If the target address is equal to A1, then we want to do something. Equals A1. And if. What do we want to do? Well, we just want to run this code that we wrote over here, get one county. So back to my compare sheet, and I'll call the get one county subprocedure. So now we don't need the button on the sheet to execute the code. Just the very fact that someone's going to change what's in A1 is going to say, oh, something's changed in A1, let's bring the data in. Let's see that it works. And we've got our new county in there. So now I'm going to do a right click and then delete that, because now I don't need that, because all I have to do is change the one I'm after and it brings it in automatically. Okay, this is a brand new way, and it's really kind of a departure from anything we've talked about so far. So just show me on a scale of 0 to 5. How many of you are going, yeah, I totally get what we just did? Seeing some 5s, some 4s. I'm kind of hoping that I'm going to see some 2s and 3s out there. I see a couple of 3s. So yeah, this is it's a new way to think. So instead of us actually saying, go run the code, to realize there's that the Visual Basic Interpreter is always sitting there watching for these events to happen, and we can configure there are literally dozens of different events that we can attach code to, watch for that event to happen, and then make the code execute as a result. Okay, that's it for today. Any other questions? Thanks for coming. Class dismissed.